Good morning. Welcome to Books at the Bottom of the Stairs. My name's Lorene. Welcome or welcome back. I'm so happy that you're here. I have two books that are very interesting to me today and a cup of tea. Let's see. The cup of tea, since it's hot, why don't I go with it? This is a brand that is, we all know about Twinings, but why am I bringing this to you? And I brought it to you in English. The other side's French. It has honeybush, orange, and mandarin flavors, naturally fortified. Well, I'm not a caffeine drinker, and I get a little bit tired of the one available decaf tea, and which is a Twinings Earl Grey decaf, or chamomile, and ginger and peppermint are my other go-to teas, but I find they can be a bit hard on the stomach at times. So this is a really lovely coming into wintertime kind of a tea, and it's just so fresh, and I really enjoy it. It's just mid-morning. It's a real break because I don't usually have oranges in the middle of the day. Okay, on to more important things. The nonfiction book that I'm bringing to you for the second week of Nonfiction November is Plantis Sapiens. And it was co-written by Paco Calvo and Natalie Lawrence. Now, Paco gets the bigger print, so I'm assuming because he's got the intellectual property, maybe that's why he comes first. Wasn't a gentleman about that, was he? He's a professor of philosophy of science and principal investigator at the Universidad de Moritz Minimal Intelligence Lab in Spain. His research interests range broadly within the cognitive sciences, with special emphasis on plant intelligence, ecological psychology, and embodied cognitive science. Now, I include all of that for those of you who really like to dig deep into a book that once you've read one book, you like to kind of like sparkle out and look for other things. I had no idea that there was ecological psychology, and I guess I know about embodied cognitive science, but not as a catchphrase. Okay, Natalie Lawrence is a natural history writer and illustrator living in London with a master's degree in natural sciences and a PhD in the history of science from the University of Cambridge. So as a side note, my daughter has an undergrad degree in the history of science, and for some reason the history of science is not seen in a lot of places as a history stream. I don't get it. Anyways, when she was applying for her master's, she was told she didn't have a history degree. So, anyhow, this is The New Science of Plant Intelligence, and I read it in about a week, really enjoyed it. About, I would say, 40 to 50 pages a day. There's a lot of information in here, and as you get further and further along, the author doesn't explain quite as much as you go along. So the first few chapters are very, very simple to grab hold of, very, very interesting. There's a lot of new ideas that are brought forward to the someone who doesn't know anything about it. And then we get into the author's own research, which seems to be a combination of philosophy and botany, and then as we move on a little bit, there's a question of ethics. Well, what's the whole underpremise? The underpremise is that plants have intelligence. We just don't, as a separate species, we don't understand their form of intelligence. So they're making the argument that through the systems that a plant has of obtaining root range, photosynthesis, expiration, reproduction, these are all energy-driven actions, and the actions are all transmitted more or less electronically, and a plant doesn't have a nervous system. So this is where things bog down, because the nervous system connected to a brain is what we see as the only way you can have intelligence. And so in the anecdotes that Paco Calvo brings along, there are, for instance, the octopus. There's a lot of books out there right now about the octopus. And the octopus doesn't have a central brain, or if the hub of the brain is perhaps in the head, and each arm has its own brain, and there are separate transmissions to and from the different arms and the central spots. So that's a diffused intelligence. So if you take a look at the octopus, for instance, and other less complex beings, you start to see that there is action and reaction. So again, we come to the question: is where does intelligence enter into the equation? How much is habitat? How much is the chemicals reacting within their language of avoidance or going forward to seek out reproduction or food? So then we've got plant experiments that take place where the plants are given options, and certain plants are able to, over time, figure out that this kind of soil type, for instance, is not going to give any kind of food rewards, and so over time the plant learns to not send roots in that direction. So is that learned behavior, or so I felt through the whole thing there was a super solid case for us as a species not understanding a different species intelligence form. I mean, what is it, Star Trek? There's all kinds of sentience out there that we have no idea about. And then I was thinking about there was a big section on vascular information being transferred up and down the plant, and I thought, wait a minute, didn't we come out of the ooze of some sort? Didn't we originally start as some kind of plant form? So we would have had some kind of vascular something or other going up and down, and we still have a vascular system. So next step would be the formation of nerves. And somewhere in my life, I saw some kind of microscopic video of a microscopic being that was basically about 3 nerve cells long or something, and electrical impulses, and it seemed to be able to retract and expand. So first signs of animal intelligence. So at the end, I would say that I was more or less convinced that there's plant sentience of some kind. And the ethical side of the argument became, if we can't figure it out, there's all kinds of naysayers and yay-sayers, and so if there's doubt, why not err on the side of avoiding suffering? Well, that's always a good argument. Why should any being, why should anything suffer if there's the capacity for suffering? So I guess that's sort of the kindest way that you can go forward into the research. If you know something about animal research as a scientist and you're going, well, that actually causes pain, let's not do that, I think that's a good thing. The last section was fairly short and goes into other scientists and their work, and it was rapid fire, and there's a brief explanation as to what they were seeking to find out, and quite a lot of scientists, both present and recently in the past, have had negative findings, but as a negative finding is still a positive finding. If you discover that something can't do something or doesn't want to do something, or you get a negative result of some kind, that's information, and you can use that information to go forward in the next round of research or exploration. So the last chapter I found a little bit overwhelming because there were so many scientists who were doing work in this area, and everything from biophysics and to I don't know, music. I think at one point someone was a musicologist doing research. So I think this is a fascinating book. It's very well written. I think if you've got more of a science background than I do, you'll probably go through this a lot more quicker. There's a lot more quickly. You'll already have a lot of the ideas just because you'll have done a master's or something. If you're the average person like me, I think this is a book that you can cherry pick a little bit. I mean, I read the whole thing, and I would recommend reading the whole thing because he ties it up very neatly at the end of each And at the end of each section, he has very good conclusions to help you bring you back if you've become a little bit lost. But also, if you're just interested in something in the index. Now, there's a very good index at the back. There's two things I would have liked to have seen that didn't happen. So if, for instance, you wanted to look up anthropomorphism, you can, just do that kind of, go and look. Charles Babbage, chess, color, ethanol. The other thing that doesn't have, okay, so I'm jabbering. He has notes for each chapter, but what he doesn't have is just a summary of the research papers and the books that he has used. There are a number of papers written by Darwin that sound really interesting. I think Darwin, we only know them for 2 books, I guess. And he just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. So I don't know whether there's a collection of his papers out there that would be interesting to get hold of, or if they're inscrutable. I mean, that would be interesting to find out. But there are a lot of other books in here that he quotes from, and research papers. And if he had summed that up at the tail end, that would have been just very handy. So if you come across a footnote, then you've got to find the footnote, do the work, go back to the notes, and do just too much cross-referencing. Turns out that it's a part of a paper that was written in 1993. That's just too much work for lazy old me. There are a lot of references in the early chapters to Darwin and other research work that was happening at that time. So we see what the building blocks are with respect to plant behavior. The other thing I would have liked to have seen is a few more images. And there is a lot. Okay, so we've got the images that we do have are somewhat oversimplified, which is good. I mean, you really get the message. But there was just so much happening in here that a few more images would have been fun. Not necessary, but fun. Now, okay, when I read nonfiction, I really do not like when the author inserts themselves into the story. And Paco Calvo does, but under 10%. And he does it in such a way, you're not on the train with him having a coffee and getting on the bus and then, finally getting to the person he's visiting. If that kind of a story is included, it is the moment with whoever he's interviewing, or if he's gone to a research lab, then, it's just contained to that section. So we don't find out what's happening with his car at the car park. I would give this a real solid 4. I think I wouldn't give it a 5 simply because of that final chapter where I was starting to get a little lost in everybody else's research. So, I totally think this is a good book. I really recommend it. And I read it without the cover on. The cover, what do you call that? Book jacket is just such a cute green. I mean, it's always a happy book to pick up. All right, I did read a fiction book, very, very, very short. And I've been picking up the books by Waubashig Rice. And so this is my 3rd book by Waubashig Rice. And I'll have to insert a picture somewhere around here because I returned it to the library this morning. Okay, I do have a note because my memory is so short. It's called Midnight Sweatlodge, Waubashig Rice. And it's about 100 pages, probably under 100 pages. It's published in 2011 and comes out of the Thetis Books Publishing in Penticton, BC. So Canadian author, Canadian publisher. There are 4 chapters. The first one is called Dust. Then we have Solace. Then we have Bloodlines. And then we have the final chapter of oh my goodness, I know how to say this word. Asinabi. When you look at it, it's way more complicated than just saying it. Okay, it's a sweat lodge, and the location is in the woods. There's a sweat lodge that has been created. There is an elder inside of the sweat lodge, and there are several young men and women who are going for their first sweat lodge. There are a couple other people who are going inside who have experienced the sweat lodge. So we get a very clear picture of the space itself, the environment, the heat, the sweating, the stones, the fire outside, the person who's guarding the fire, the elder inside, and it's a very claustrophobic kind of a space. At the same time, it's not, because the elder is very attuned to how much heat and sweat the participants can take as their first time experience, so they don't get overwhelmed and they don't, fall asleep or feel choky or anything. So it's mostly kind of claustrophobic because you're sitting like right beside the next person. Everybody's sweat mingles. So the 4 chapters, we've got 4 individuals who are telling their story, because the premise in this book is that in the Sweatlodge you tell your story, and you tell the story that you haven't been feeling safe about telling anyone else, anywhere else, and this is where the stories stay put. And the elder will hold the story. You can keep coming back to the Sweatlodge and working your way through the story, but basically, by telling the story and experiencing the memories again, you begin to heal. And by having witnesses to your story who are also traveling the same journey of I'm going to say reconciliation with yourself, in the terms of accepting your stories, accepting your past, working through what that means. And all the noises in the background was the cat playing, and she's just stuck her nose right into the water and is now sneezing. Okay, so each story is definitely connected to trauma of different kinds. The kind of trauma that we've probably read about in other books, but this is a very intense moment in each character's life. They don't have names particularly. The last one is a very interesting story because this is a person who's like deep into alcoholism, young man, young family, really in denial about the situation, but also at the same time really unhappy with the situation, and panics and leaves the Sweatlodge, and in their after Sweatlodge experience has a very profound experience that is not exactly supernatural. I think, between the drinking and the sort of, what is that called, when you're sort of detoxing and immediately after coming off of drinking on a huge lot, a huge amount, and then the sweating, and then the running out in the cold, and falling, and all these kinds of things have happened to him. He comes upon insight into the adjacent world and the legends, and calls his friend, and they figure out what the experience means, and it's profoundly impactful on this young man. And is it hopeful? Not 100%. Is it completely a disaster? Not 100%. Is it interesting? It is. It's absolutely fascinating. So these 4 stories are very intense. The writing style of Waubashig Rice is also interesting. I'm reading him kind of chronologically, and so he has some sentences that are just so crisp and powerful and evocative. You can really smell and taste and sweat. You can really feel the tension. And then he has a sentence that's just like a salad bowl of words. He, 6 or 7 nouns that each have 2 or 3 adjectives attached to them. So, and they're kind of florid. Yes, we'll go with florid. Florid adjectives. So, instead of thunderous, it might be the catastrophic bouncing of the sound against the rocks, thundering. So I think as I've read Rice's work, he starts to edit out that kind of I don't know what that is, right? I think maybe that's like a writerly conceit. I can come up with an image, or I can come up with a metaphor, simile, that's just going to be really profound. And then after a while, as a writer, you start to realize, actually, I don't need to do that. I can be very clear in what I'm trying to say without using all this surrounding language. So I think the other book, what was that called? Snow, Light on Crust. Oh my goodness. Do you remember the name of that other one? No, he's not listening. Light on Crusted Snow. There's a new book coming out by Rice that I'm really looking forward to read, and I think he's just really developing as a nice writer. I think, if he keeps writing, I think he's going to be an author to keep on paying attention to. So that's it for me. What have I got next as far as nonfiction goes? I can't really decide. I'm going to Ottawa, and I've got In Pieces by Sally Field, which is something, I don't know, maybe that's better. I don't know, might not interest me. What if I don't like it? That's always my dilemma when I travel. What if I've read it before? What if I don't like it? I have Poetry by William Seagard. It's called the Poetry Pharmacy, which I believe I've mentioned before, and it is a gathering of different thoughts and poems by multiple authors. And I have Lost in Work, Escaping Capitalism. That could be a good snore, or it could be really interesting, and I know I haven't read that one. And then I have a couple of small fiction books that I'm working my way through too. So that's it for me. I hope all your reading dreams and adventures continue to come true, and I will see you, maybe from Ottawa. Yeah, maybe from Ottawa. Talk to you soon. Bye.